focusing on a jet pocket, double jet pocket. We have a slit here in my jacket or blazer, and I've prepared the dart and the side seam beforehand. I've also prepared my jets. They come like that. You fold them in half, you press them, mark your seam allowance. In this case it's 2 centimeters on either end, and I've measured 2 centimeters from the dart towards the front. That's where my jet pocket will start. I will place my seam allowance onto the 2 centimeter pin, and the raw edge of the jet follows that cutting line. Okay. We're now going to stitch in the middle of the jet. That's 1.2 centimeters wide, so your seam allowance or the stitching line will be at 6 millimeters. Going to stitch from that pin, that mark. So I need to put my needle in where that pin is, and you can see the foot has a little bit of fabric on either side. So this needs to be very accurate sewing, because that determines the width of your jet. Back tack on both ends. Back tack here. And I have one jet sewn on. I've started pinning my second jet onto the top here, so the raw edges are lining up, and I pinned from this end to that end, and that's exactly where I stopped sewing here, so it has to be on a right angle. And we're now going to stitch that on. Same thing again in the middle of the jet. Make sure that you start at the right point. Back tack. Back tack on this end, and we're ready to cut the jet open. I've turned the blazer over. This is on the wrong side. You can see that slit. We're now cutting this part open here in the middle. Probably easier with scissors. And you need to stop about 1 centimeter or 1.5 centimeters before the end of your stitching line, and we're going to cut just on the jacket, not the jet, into here, and then on this side. I'm going to turn this around so it's easy for me to cut. I move the jets out, and I clip right to the stitching line. Here, and you can see the stitching is here, and then on this side stitching is here, so it's going to look like this from that side. We're now ready to turn this over to the wrong side, so the jet is facing to the inside. It looks like I'm doing magic here. Pulling this through. And as we pull that through, we can actually press it. So both those jet width, or the width of the jet, determines the opening of this part here, and it depends on how far you stitch apart. So this is very important that you work very accurately in this section. As you can see, the seams here are quite bulky, so if you want to, you can cut them down a little bit, so it reduces a bit of the amount of the seam allowance. I cut them on an angle, so you still have heaps here, but it's a little bit less up here. And now we're going to attach our pocket facing. Now, the pocket facing sits on the upper jet like that, because when we look at the jacket we want to see the actual material, the self, rather than lining. So what I'm going to do here is place that pocket facing onto my jet, pin it down, and then we're ready to sew. Now I've pinned that on, we're sewing this so by turning that over, and I'm stitching in the same stitching line as my jet that I've done before. Just line this nicely up. And really try and stitch in the same stitching line. All the way out and back tuck. So my pocket facing is attached, and that's what it looks like from that side. Now we need to attach our pocket lining, which goes onto here. Pocket lining needs to be on this jet. To do that, we need to fold that up. Place the same as with the upper, with the pocket facing. Place that on. Pin. And we're going to stitch in the same stitching line, like that. All the way out, and we have our pocket nearly done. Now we're going to press the pocket lining down. Oops, a bit of water came out. Press this part, suction. And then we're also going to check this on the outside, making sure that I haven't pressed any tucks into here, but that looks all fine. And we're going to pin this part close, and then we're ready to stitch the sides. Now we're going to pin the jet, the under jet, the lower one, onto the upper. Just make sure that we're not gaping. And you can see that it needs to be a nice smooth line, because that's your seam. I just pin that, and now we can close the sides on either side by folding that aside and making sure that we really stitch this part down. When I stitch the corners down, I make sure that my jets are lining up. You can see they're lining up here. They're not overlapping or gaping, so they're really lining up here. That needs to be on a right angle, and then a stitch from that clipping point to this clipping point, and that will look like that. And then I'm going to do the same on this side by turning this over, folding that over, and you can see how my jets are overlapping here. I just push that down, move that out. Same thing again, back tack, back tack, and we have the ends secured. Now we can close our pocket bag. Best to pin. Leave those pins from the front still in. Push this down. And then we can close our pocket bag. You can use the 2 centimeter seam allowance, follow from there all the way down to there, or 1.2, what I'm doing here, just from the top. And we can take those pins out. Our pocket bag is closed. Give it a nice good press, but this is what your pocket looks like.